Certain pathways lead to unforeseen distensions. Occasionally, a solitary addition influences the entirety of your existence. Often one does not comprehend sensation of traversing an erroneous path until the initial step has been taken. I dedicated years to mucking appropriations. I married Anderson at the age of 38. Prior to that moment, I had consistently envisioned establishing a family and providing my future child with a nurturing home. However, Anderson never harbored the same aspirations. Initially, he fulfilled all commitments expected of a husband, has stated that we will construct a life together. As the years progressed, I recognized that I was but a shadow in his existence. Anderson never genuinely prioritized me or the family we could have established. His employment, his timetable, his inflexible habits consistently furts. Initially, I deceived myself he might undergo a transformation. Perhaps one day he would recognize the increasing void within me. However, Anderson remained unchanged. He remained unchanged with each successive year. My solitude intensified. However, Drake was distinct Anderson's offspring from his initial marriage. Upon our initial encounter, he was 19 years old, newly enrolled in college, eager, motivated, and burning with potential. Anderson consistently maintained his distance from him, believing that fatherhood entailed solely financial provision. However, Drake desired more than that. He sought to validate his worth and establish his own trajectory. He embodied qualities that Anderson lacked. Before I was even aware, I began observing him as Drake approached graduation. He made a pivot decision that altered the course of his life. All anticipated that he would accept a lucrative position in engineering. However, he expressed a desire to become a mechanic. Anderson experienced a loss upon discovering the information, shouting, fuming, and menacing to withdraw financial support. I vividly recall the reverberations of that dispute rattling the walls of our home. Subsequently, Drake departed on the night following graduation. He gathered his belongings and departed silently. I was unable to bid farewell. I did not inquire about his destination. Had I allowed myself to reveal the extent of my pain at his departure, I would have been compelled to acknowledge a further truth and unforeseen challenge. I was unprepared to confront. 2 years have elapsed since his departure. I have encountered him only a few times. The connection we shared, it was no longer present. It was not intended to be. This evening, while I was seated in a dilapidated vehicle on a dim rain-soaked road, I recognized that there was no one else I could contact. I was not yet aware of it. However, a transformation was imminent. It would exceed my expectations. It would occur anonymously. I grasped my phone, my fingers immediately poised over Anderson's name. However, it hid within seconds. Even if he responded, was it not evident what his reply would be? Contact a tow truck. Cameron, I am distant. He would terminate the call without further comment. I gulped audibly. I gazed at the screen for several seconds. I subsequently exited the call and focused on a different name, Drake. An unusual disquiet stirred within me. My finger lingered above his contact. Ought I to contact him? Was this only a plea for assistance, or was it an alternative explanation, something inarticulate and unspecified, until utilizing this as a pretext? The rain drummed softly on the windows. In the illumination of my headlights, I observed a towering, robust form advancing through the darkness. A peculiar sense of relief enveloped me upon witnessing the scene. Drake approached the vehicle and tapped on the glass. As I slightly lowered it, this voice emerged, recognizable and unwavering. Cameron, are you well? My gaze fixated on him. His visage was marginally moist from the precipitation. His features are more pronounced than I recalled. His posture is unlabored yet robust. He was no longer a boy. He was an individual. During these 2 years, it was not solely the distance between us that had altered. He had transformed. Indeed, the vehicle halted abruptly, and I was uncertain of how to proceed. I said, I visited my mother. It occurred during the return journey. Anderson is once again out of town. I refrained from calling him because I'm already aware of his response. Contact a tow truck. Cameron, he would likely become irritated with me for it. If this is your initial exposure to such confessions, please join our channel and subscribe with notifications sent all prior to progressing. You may find yourself desiring that this narrative remains perpetual. Drake inclined his head, little a glimmer of comprehension in his gaze. I understand the reason for your failure to contact, and he stated with composure, rest assured, I have this under control. He inclined forward, unfastening hood and illuminating the engine with his flashlight. I observed his hands maneuver with accuracy, his muscles contracting with every deliberate movement. He had transcended his status as merely a college student. His every movement exuded confidence, and his handling of matters Demonstrative expiry, it is evident that this issue will not be resolved here. He eventually stayed, closing the hood. We must transport it to the garage. I must operate the vehicle due to the potential stiffness of the steering. You will keep the passenger. See, I will park my truck here. I will return for it later. I did not inquire into it. I was not obligated to my confidence, and Drake's presence assured me that everything will ultimately be fine. The atmosphere was steamy during the trip, however thesilence between us remained untroublesome. It seemed to draw us near without either of us being aware. Drake occasionally glanced at me, his voice unwavering as he conveyed information, mating the dialogue and effortlessly occupying the space between us. I paid attention. I observed him, his hands deftly maneuvered the steering wheel, his voice resonated, and his presence was palpable beside me upon his departure 2 years prior. I failed to acknowledge the extent to which his absence created a gap within me. Anderson had consistently echoed aloofness, however. Drake's presence was distinct, his vitality, his vocalization, his gaze, even at that time an awakening occurred within me. I was not yet prepared to confront it. I recollected that evening, the evening crusting his departure. There existed an unspoken connection between us, one that had never transgressed boundaries, yet had the potential to do so. The potential had always existed. Drake has returned, turned older, more mature, and significantly more captivating. An unsettling disquiet rose throughout me. This emotion was prohibited. It was not intended to be present here. However, it was regardless of my efforts to conceal it. I sensed it with every breath I inhaled in his presence upon our arrival at the garage. Inhaled deeply, attempting to regain composure. As I opened the car door, yet an inner voice said, This evening you are both transformed, and you are both aware of it. The garage are of engine oil and metal as the rhythmic patter offering reverberated off the roof. Drake raised his head from beneath the hood, removing a fine sheen of perspiration from his forehead before directing his gaze towards me. His eyes exhibited little fatigue, yet his attitude was contemplative. It is becoming late, he remarked, his tone deep and unwavering. If I commence repairs on this vehicle, now we will remain here until dawn. It is advisable to address it first thing tomorrow. I acquiesced, although it was not an issue. Drake's posture conveyed a strong message. This was not only an ordinary night. He remarked that the rain was intensifying. Remain here. I will accompany a friend to retrieve my truck, after which I will return to take you home. I do not wish for you to wait other alone. His voice exuded the subtle authority of an individual who is attentive to details. Anderson did not comply in this circumstance. He would have been indifferent. He would have anticipated that I would manage it in some manner. However, Drake was distinctive upon his exit. The stillness of the garage enveloped me. Rain lashed against the roof as I seated myself, clasping my hands in my lap rationally. I ought to have felt irritated or anxious. Me vehicle malfunction. I returned home late. My arrangements had disintegrated. However, the peculiar aspect was I was indifferent. I experienced a sense of tranquility exceeding that I experienced joy. What is the reason? This was merely avehilar malfunti. The scenario was unremarkable. However, this evening nothing about it seemed commonplace. Drake's gaze, the warmth of his voice, and the way his presence enveloped the place an inward transformation was occurring within me while I awaited. I contemplated it through the years. Drake matured into an adult, resilient, self-sufficient. Moreover, his presence alleviated my sense of alone. That sensation, whatever it may have been, was embedding itself profoundly within me. The roar of an engine outside interrupted my contemplation. Drake arrived at the garage, entering with water cascading down his shoulders, entirely indifferento. The rain prepared, he inquired, his gaze fixed upon mine. I rose, cinching my jacket more closely around me before affirming with a nod. We exited together and entered the vehicle. As we traveled, me inside sensation intensive. I glanced at him, attempting to articulate my emotions. I remarked with a subtle smile, when such an occurrence transpires, the majority of individuals experience frustration, anxiety, or a sense of misfortune. However, I do not share that sentiment. Interestingly, I perceived content. Drake offered a little smile while maintaining his gaze on the road, acknowledged his understanding graciously, even at inopportune moments. Circumstance may evoke indeed. His voice was gentle. However, there existed a more profound element within it. The barriers he had constructed around my solitude were district. At that time, I comprehended the extent of Anderson's emotional distance and the profound solitude I experienced despite his physical proximity. Furthermore, I recognized that Drake perceived it as well. The tension between us has becoming mystical. I experienced an inward compulsion, a subtle yet relentless murmur. I wished for this night to persist indefinitely. As we approached my residence, I inhaled deeply, summoning my fortitude. Drake, you've been contending with this for several hours, I remark at that. You must be famished. Attempting to maintain eye contact. Enter. Let us dine together as we once did. Drake regarded momentarily mute, a momentary pause, subsequently that recognizable full smile. How could I declined, they stated, and an internal spark ignite within me upon entering and commencing supper preparations. In the kitchen, the stress I ought to have experienced from the nearly vanished, we shared laughter and engaged in conversation about past recollections, remembering as though nothing had altered. However, all circumstances had transformed each time. Our gazes intersected. We were both aware of it. There was no possibility of retreat. The gentle glow of candlelight illuminated table. We had been conversing for some time, exchanging anecdotes and lawing as we typically did it, irreducibly effortless and strikingly familiar. However, the atmosphere separating us, it was not identical. Drake reclined slightly in his chair, crossed his arms while observing intently. His glance exuded warmth. Additionally, there is another aspect, a whimsical notion. Something novel, I must concede, he remarked with a little smirk. You are as stunning as always today. In fact, it is somewhat incredible. It appears that you have become even younger during the past 2 years. If I were unfamiliar with you, I would assert I am 26 years old, and this woman appears to be no more than 30. I would likely be attempting to enchant her at this moment. I chuckled surprisedly. The casual manner in which he expressed it, the unforeseen compliment, his cornered me, yet I could not refute me. Enjoyment of it, thank you, but I am 45 years old, Drake, I remarked, maintaining me smile. There is an approximate 2 age difference between us. Age is merely a numerical value, he remarked, his tone descending in pitch. We are both aware of that. His words ignited a surge of warmth within me. The table became quite although the quietude was no tongue comfortable. It was dense and weightless, if something were on the brink of fracturing. Drake inclined his head little, his eyes probing me as if he were perceiving something profound beyond the surface, an issue that we could no longer overlook. I remarked, attempting to direct the discussion. You have changed us. Well, your departure indicated that you were beginning to mature. However, at this moment you are an adult male. Drake's smile gradually diminished, supplanted by a more somber expression. He rested his palm unbiddable, his fingers gently gliding over the surface, pausing momentarily. He then gazed directly into me eyes and articulated his words. I had affections for you, Cameron. A sudden constriction occurred within me. Drake, I'm aware, he persisted. I was never mean to disclose it. However, I no longer wish to conceal it. Upon departing Theater's guidance, I believe that by honoring you and maintaining distance, I would forget. I believed it was merely a transient phenomenon that would diminish over time. However, it did not. He inhaled deeply, his eyes ensnaring me, rendering me captive. Now observing you in this matter, experience an entire distinct sensation. Observing you in this alone state, it profoundly affects me emotionally. My heart raced intensely, as if my entire existence had fractured into 2 parts. One part urged me to flee, while the other, a facet of myself scarcely recognized, yearned solely to remain and absorb every word he uttered. Drake, I was unable to complete my sentence. His gaze was so intensely fixated on mine that I felt breathless. Subsequently, instinctively, my fingers extended across the table to grasp his hand. Drake grasped my hand. His epidermis was heated robust. At that instant, all became silently relocated. Simultaneously, as we leaned closer, we exchanged a final glance before closing our eyes. Subsequently, our lips converged. Initially, it was sluggish and tentative. However, within moments, all that we had repressed, every bit of stress we had overlooked for years, waylaid seamlessly, and Drake cradled my face, drawing me nearer. My body naturally drew closer to his. The more I experienced his warmth, the more I recognized that something within me, which I had lost for years, was being revived at that point. I realized there was no possibility of retreat. Despite Jabray's lips lingering on mine, I sensed a stirring within me, something I had suppressed for an extended period. My hands autonomously glided down his shoulders as he drew me closer, resolute to be and entirely emperor. I approached Drake, up and gazing into his eyes. I observed his hand moving gradually. It heightened my enthusiasm. I experienced an inside sensation sensation. Despite experiencing prolonged acute pain at that moment, I remained indifferent. All continued unentrapped. I emitted loud sounds and in harmony with my energy. I continuously expressed my gratitude to Drake breathlessly. He also experienced happiness. I observed the enthusiasm in his eyes. We discovered one another. We were completely harmonious in all aspects. I placed my hand on Drake's shoulders, concerned that my nails could be causing him discomfort. My body became rigid and quivered. I did not anticipate such a reaction. It was evident that Drake appreciated it. I implored him to release the script to seize restraint as he uttered my name. Cameron's voice gradually diminished, and he ultimately relinquished control. A profound warmth enveloped me. Inhaling deeply, I allowed myself to fall beside him as I reclined next to Drake. My heart continued to race. Our respiration was irregular, however, internally I had an ineffable trinity. Experiencing him proximity to him, it resembled reinserted a long-lost fragment. Drake shifted to his side, establishing eye contact with me. His hand glided over my hair, outlining my visage. His gaze exuded conviction, a gaze that conveyed the authenticity of the situation. This was not merely a transient diversion. Cameron articulated deliberately, "You must depart from Andons." The constriction occurred within. I had anticipated this moment for him to articulate it. Nevertheless, the words lingered in the atmosphere. "He is unworthy of you. He didn't ever do so. He abandoned you for years, never demonstrated affection for you, transformed your existence into a mere semblance of its potential. You are unworthy of such a life." I attempted to articulate a statement, however, he prohibited me. By doing this, we might commence anew in a different location, in a very unfamiliar land where we are unknown to all. I reminder to all other matters, I hold deep affection for you, Cameron. I can no longer tolerate witnessing your sadness and solitude. I made a contact with him, the authenticity in his speech and the fervent yearning in his gaze. It profoundly unsettled me. A warmth enveloped my internally, an emotion I had not experienced in years. Expectation. Was this an evasion, perhaps? However, it also presented an opportunity. I was contemplating the prospect of an unprecedented happiness. He inhaled deeply and grinned. Drake's words became lodged in my throat. In that instant, our eyes said everything. Our hands connected, fingers interlacing. The narrative was not concluded. Additional information existed. This time it was advancing much further. Remain attentive for subsequent developments. If you have reached this point, it is evident that this narrative resonated profoundly with you. There is plenty more to convey, and you do not wish to overlook any of it. Ensure click the follow button, active notifications, and leave a remark regarding this narrative.